All right, let's dive into the fall of the Berlin Wall. We've got some fascinating stuff to unpack, like excerpts from this BBC article, Fall of Berlin Wall, How 1989 Reshaped the Modern World, and some background from, well, the trusty Wikipedia. But this isn't just a history lesson. Think of it more as well, kind of like a cheat sheet. All those little details, the quirky stories, the things that still matter today. You know,
You're right, it's more than just dates and names. The Berlin Wall was part of a much bigger story, a whole system that was, well, how do I put it, on the verge of collapse.
Yeah, so before we get to that iconic night in November, gotta set the stage a bit. Picture this. Europe, right after World War II, split right down the middle, divided. And Germany, including Berlin, was right there at the heart of it.
And West Berlin, it became this island of democracy and capitalism, right smack in the middle of communist East Germany. You can imagine the pressure that put on the East German government, right? Their own people constantly looking for a way out, a way to the other side.
And that's what led to, well, to the wall going up in 1961. A pretty drastic move, really, to try and stop that brain drain they were facing. But fast forward to 1989, and those cracks, they were starting to show. And not just in Berlin.
Yeah, think about what was happening in Poland. The Solidarity movement with Lech Walesa at the helm, they were really challenging the communist regime. And they weren't the only ones.
Oh, yeah, then you've got Hungary literally dismantling their border fence with Austria, just opening it up. Talk about a hole in the Iron Curtain, right? And then there's the Baltic Way. 2 million people. Can you believe that? 2 million people holding hands, forming a human chain across Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. What a powerful image.
Oh, absolutely. A singing revolution, they called it. It really showed how strong the desire for change was. All of this put immense pressure on East Germany, which was already, to be honest, struggling economically, I mean.
Right, people were finding ways to flee, and the protests, those were growing too. Leipzig especially became a real flashpoint.
Oh, yeah. Every week, the protests got bolder. Not just small gatherings, but massive demonstrations. People were demanding democracy, real change.
So Egon Krenz, the new leader, he was in a tough spot. Tried some reforms, trying to calm things down a bit.
He was under immense pressure, you have to understand. People were fleeing through other countries. The economy was a mess. His reforms, they were just too little, too late, really.
Like trying to put out a wildfire with a garden hose, I guess.
Exactly. And, well, those attempts to control things, they backfired spectacularly.
Okay, so now we're getting close to November 9th, 1989. The press conference with Günter Schabowski, the East German official. They hand him a note right there on stage about new travel regulations. But you could just tell he has no idea what they mean.
Oh, this press conference, it's almost like comical when you look back at it. Schabowski, he's fumbling, he's clearly confused by what's in his hand, and then he says it, the phrase that changed everything.
Immediately, without delay. That's how he described these new regulations, that East Germans could travel to West Berlin, just like that. You can imagine the reaction in that room, right?
The reporters, they were stunned. I mean, who wouldn't be? Did he misspeak? Did he misunderstand the instructions? We're still debating that today, but one thing's for sure, it was a catalyst. This unexpected spark that ignited a chain reaction, well, a revolution, really.
So that one sentence, immediately, without delay, it set everything in motion.
News traveled fast. East Germans, I mean, they'd been waiting for this moment, some of them, their whole lives. They rushed to those border crossings, no hesitation.
Thousands of people, all converging on these checkpoints. The energy, the anticipation, you can almost feel it.
It was a true test for those border guards. I mean, they had no warning, no preparation, totally outnumbered, facing this sea of people.
And they all wanted one thing, freedom. Those pictures from that night, they're just incredible. People climbing the wall, chipping away at it, anything they could find to use as a tool.
Yeah. Those wall peckers, that's what they called them. Everyday people, not soldiers, not politicians, just driven by this need to tear down this symbol, this barrier.
And at Bornholmer Strasse, one of the crossings, those guards, they finally caved. They opened the gates. What else could they do?
It wasn't a planned demolition, nothing like that. It was an eruption. People were ecstatic, celebrating, hugging, crying. Families reunited after years, decades even, of separation.
It's hard to grasp the scale of it all. This wall, this physical barrier, but also this mental one, just gone.
And the impact, it went way beyond Berlin. I mean, less than a year later, Germany was reunified.
Like we were saying earlier, those dominoes started falling.
Yeah.
Poland, Hungary, the Baltic states, they all got their independence soon after.
It changed everything. The political map of Europe, the whole world, really. The Soviet Union, they were already struggling, internal problems, a stagnant economy. And then this, it was like the final blow.
The Cold War, this decades-long standoff, it was over. Makes you wonder, could the Soviet Union have survived? Or was this collapse just inevitable?
That's a question historians are still debating, actually. Gorbachev, the Soviet leader at the time, some say he saw the writing on the wall, that trying to hold everything together, it was just a losing battle.
His policies, glasnost, and perestroika.
Right. Openness and restructuring.
Yeah.
He was trying to reform the Soviet system, modernize it.
But it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Those attempts to modernize, they might have actually sped up the collapse.
It was a real dilemma for Gorbachev. Try to maintain control by force, like in the past.
Well, the world had just seen what happened in Tiananmen Square, just months earlier.
Yeah, I remember thinking, here we go again, another crackdown. But it didn't happen.
Instead, Gorbachev, well, he basically adopted this, what they called the Sinatra Doctrine, a policy of non-intervention in Eastern Europe.
Do it their way, like the song.
Exactly. Each nation was free to choose their own path. What a shift from the Soviet Union's previous stance. And this hands-off approach, it really played a big part in that peaceful collapse, you know?
Yeah, relatively peaceful, I should say. There was one big exception, Romania.
Right, their leader, Nicolae Ceausescu.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't giving up power that easily.
Romania, it was a different story compared to the rest of Eastern Europe. The protests there, they were met with violence. Things escalated quickly.
Ceausescu and his wife, they were captured and executed. Christmas Day, 1989.
A brutal end to a brutal regime.
It's a reminder that freedom doesn't always come easy.
Sometimes that fight for liberty, it comes at a high price. The fall of the Berlin Wall, it's a complex story. Geopolitics, individual courage, a system collapsing under its own weight. But maybe most importantly, it shows the power of ordinary people to change the course of history.
So it all started with a kind of, well, a communication mess-up. Makes you think, was the wall coming down anyway? Or was it, this one weird press conference that really tipped things over the edge?
It's a good question. I mean, it shows you how these big historical shifts, they're not always, planned out. You've got these long-term pressures building up, and then, bam, some random event just sets everything off. Like in this case, yeah, people in Eastern Europe, they'd been wanting freedom for years. But it was Schabowski's announcement that was the spark.
Like he lit a fuse without even realizing it.
Exactly. And the Soviets, the fact that they didn't step in, that's huge. Can you imagine if they'd sent in the tanks like in Hungary or Czechoslovakia?
It would have been a completely different story. All that joy, all that celebration turning into violence. It's hard to even think about.
Gorbachev letting those Eastern European countries go their own way, that was a major turning point. It showed that the Soviet Union, they couldn't hold on anymore.
So the Berlin Wall coming down, it wasn't just about Germany, was it? It was this symbol, this victory for freedom, for people choosing their own destiny.
Exactly. It proved that even against a system like that, people power, collective action, it can work. It's a story that still matters today, especially now when we see new walls going up all over the place.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, will we ever see anything like this again?
Yeah.
People power actually overcoming these massive obstacles.
It's something to think about. The Berlin Wall, it shows us that change is possible. Even when it seems impossible, it's about standing up for what you believe in, no matter what.
And sometimes change comes from the most unexpected places.
Hmm.
I mean, who would have thought? A confused official at a press conference ends up changing the world.
Right. It's a reminder that everything's connected. What happens in one place can affect so many others. The Berlin Wall, it shows us that we're all part of this bigger story. And our actions, even the small ones, they matter.
So that's it for our deep dive into the fall of the Berlin Wall. Hope you learned something new, something that, maybe makes you think a little differently about this whole event.
Yeah, and if you're interested in learning more, there's so much out there. Books, documentaries, all sorts of stuff.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep questioning. Until next time. Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.